Okay. Hello, everybody. It's me, Laura Von Holt, the fairy boss mother, author, entrepreneur, cool person as I self identify. And today on You're Doing Great, we have our very special guest with me. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tori Scott.
And Tori, what do you do in the world?
Oh my gosh. I am an entertainer, singer, comedian, sometimes actress, well, wannabe actress.
Great.
And I perform mainly right now, performing my cabarets of drunken debauchery throughout internationally and throughout the United States.
This is wonderful and everything I ever dreamed for you. Um, so this is actually, I realized today, kind of a full circle moment. I told you I had surprises for you, Tori. This is a full circle moment.
Hmm.
Because I was like, oh, it was 10 years ago that you and I met. And you had me on your show before there were really
Yes.
podcasts, right? Okay. Before there were podcasts, you had this like online radio show called The
Mhm.
Happy Hour Show.
Yep.
And I remember that I came on, and this is when I was going as Von Hottie, and I was like a pinup who gave really good advice. And I had a
Hmm.
cocktail named after me at my favorite bar, and so I came on the radio show, and I like made it for you and Leslie, and we got
Yes.
like drunk, and I don't even know what we talked about, but it was like
Oh.
pre-podcast
Yeah. No,
era.
Leslie and I still talk about that.
Oh,
Like, it just was hard with our schedule to keep things going, and technology was different.
yeah,
And it just, yeah, you couldn't put it anywhere else other than like this one website where it would stream for a
yeah,
certain amount of time.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. We
Yeah.
were pre-podcast.
Well, I was trying to find it, and I could find like the email blast that I sent out to my list to be like, "Come listen to this thing," but I couldn't find the recording, which I think is fine. I'm sure it actually does not
I
need to
can
be.
I wonder if Leslie's boyfriend, because he did all of the engineering and stuff, maybe they
Beautiful.
have it. I
No,
can
I
ask.
remember going to like the apartment, and there was like a full setup with like real mics, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
this is a radio
yeah.
show."
No, it was hardcore.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Well, so in contrast to that professional setup, the other podcast I have is the Mermaid Podcast, and I will tell people this story is that Tori Scott is the voice of the theme song of the Mermaid Podcast, which is one of my favorite theme songs. I also have a good one for this one, but my other favorite part about that is I was like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast, and I didn't even know how to like open GarageBand, and I called you and I was like, can I kind of invented a theme song? Can you sing it for me? And you're like, sure, I have a few minutes before I go on stage at Joe's
Yeah,
Pub.
yeah.
Bring my new microphone and my laptop and my friend who like kind of knew she knows GarageBand. And so I remember like recording, like I kind of sang the song for you and then you
Yeah.
sang it back and then we went in the bathroom to record it and we
Yep.
had to a good thing it's a short song because we only had a few like 25 seconds in between the fan going the
Yeah.
lights and the fan were automatic in the bathroom at the dressing rooms. So this is a full circle moment. Tori Scott, my first radio show was on your show, and you sang the first theme song for my podcast. So,
From the bathroom of Joe's Pub.
yeah, I mean, my friends are like, "This is glamorous. You have a professional." I was like, "Yeah, it's so professional."
That's business.
Yeah. All right. So enough about some of the shenanigans we've gotten into. But all right. So you are an entertainer. You are, as I like to call, internationally known entertainer Tori Scott. Um, but you have kind of had a different career path, and one of the reasons I want to talk to you is that we talked about being you said a wannabe actress, and I was like,
Yeah.
it's always good to still have aspirations, Tori. like, but one of the because I've known you and you worked at the public theater with a whole bunch of my friends, where everyone assumes that I worked, but it's just that I volunteered at enough parties that it looked like I worked there. People, I don't actually can't put it on
You
my
could still probably put it
yeah,
on your
totally.
resume.
Yeah, I mean, it's listed on there because so many people have tagged me as an employee. So,
Right.
but I think we have a slightly similar background in that, like, I went to a liberal arts school with a heavy performance bent. And
Mhm.
I remember, like, kind of the way that people told you things would happen when you got out of college is like, okay, so I was like, yes, I want to be a performer. I want to be in front of people. Like the thing I wanted to do was be in front of people, and the only way to do that was to be like in theater. Because I was like, great, I'll be in theater. And the way that people made it sound like what would happen to you after college is like, okay, you're going to move to New York. I'm like, okay. Or LA. And I was like, oh, I think New York. You're going to audition a lot. You're going to be miserable. Maybe you'll be a waitress, and then you'll just try not to get like any eating disorders or like body image issues from the industry. And I was like, so, okay, that's the career path.
Yes, because all of the teachers that have said this don't currently live in New York or LA.
Exactly. So I did realize that like about 7 years later, I was like, wait, all of the advice they gave me, they did not take or know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great.
It's a pattern among all of the liberal arts and conservatory programs.
Great. Okay, so so that took me a while to figure out that they actually hadn't know what they're talking about, and then I could just kind of like make it up or do something else. So I would love to hear from you just kind of like a broad sketch of what your creative and professional life has been like. You don't have to give me every like twist and turn, but just like the things you've done as day jobs, the things that you've done performance wise, like when the big turns happened, and then even if they weren't like the big turns that you put on a resume, like what they were for you.
Yeah. I mean, I graduated from a conservatory program, the Boston Conservatory. They call it BOCO. And showcased, moved to New York, thankfully with a bunch of friends, our like class of 20 something. I don't really know how people just up and move to New York not knowing anyone. That's, that was a big deal. And then I didn't have an agent right away. Some people did. So I was working like many jobs, surviving. I lived with 3 other girls in Astoria. It was such a great apartment too. It was $500 each. And then they changed like building owners. And when I lived in Astoria, I would walk by it and just be like, oh God, I remember you. We had the best parties. It was great. Although I couldn't live with 3 girls again.
Yeah, fair.
But, we were young. And I auditioned like right when I got to New York. I was auditioning and getting some pretty good callbacks, and started working with an agent sort of like, not permanently, just he was trying me out, and got a couple good auditions, but I couldn't sustain it because I was working so many jobs. Because again, like you said, they don't really teach you how to move to New York and survive. So they all say like, oh, just, wait tables or do these jobs so that you're open to audition. But, you have to pay your rent. You have to pay your student loans. You have to pay, I had credit card debt even, moving to New York. And so that all of the auditioning kind of moved to the side. And it took most of my 20s to kind of figure out how to be a performer in New York and live in New York. And so my I kind of like stopped performing for a couple years, and then found my way into the public theater working administratively. And at the same time started performing at a gay bar because my friend was a bartender. I got very drunk because my friend was a bartender.
Great.
And it was a gay bar, obviously, and they had a stage upstairs. It was Vlada, which no longer exists.
Okay.
And they said, we have a stage upstairs and we'd love for people to perform. We have drag queens, but we want to, make a variety of entertainers. You should do a show. And he brought the manager over and they were like, do a show. And I was like, sure, I'll do a show.
While you're inebriated.
But completely smashed.
Okay.
And so the only reason I knew it was confirmed was when I woke up the next day that there were texts confirming it. And so, but it got me performing again. And on top of working at the public, again, just like administratively in the office, I was doing these shows at Vlada. People were starting to come, and like they were nothing like they are now. I mean, thank God, you're evolving as you go. But they were good enough to where people saw them and said, "Oh, you should come perform at Joe's Pub." And my career has totally shifted to being, this one-woman show work. I mean, it's cabaret, but it's also like a different kind of cabaret. And that's actually started to open doors for me, auditioning again. So it's like a full circle moment.
Right. Okay.
I came here to do musical theater, and with dreams of being on Broadway, got a little bit sidetracked with other things, but have found my way back to it.
Yeah.
A good amount of years later.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. That's kind of why I wanted to talk to you about it too, because it was like number one, just it's just such an interesting time, and to move in your life, to move to New York and try to figure out like how you're going to support yourself while also having a creative career. And I don't think like this idea of like, oh, just go waitress, or wait tables or bartend doesn't account for like just the scheduling alone in that like doesn't necessarily free you up for auditioning. It's like it doesn't take into account like health insurance and all of those things that we need.
And this was before I think it was Obama that allowed you to be on your parents' health insurance until
totally. So we all got out of college and we're like,
we're out of college.
Yeah.
And the other thing though that, I have nothing against people that have this kind of help. Mm-hmm. It's just, I think, important for people to be transparent, because my roommates, they had more help financially from their parents out of school than I did.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Their parents were able to do it, and that's great. I just think for years, I didn't quite, because they wouldn't be honest with me about it.
So you're like, why am I struggling more than you? Because they just weren't being like, I have more help.
Exactly.
So then you're like, I'm doing it wrong.
Well, because they were embarrassed or whatever, which I don't think you need to be embarrassed. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people help their kids out after college and say, great, we're going to help you out for this long. And that my family just couldn't do that. And there's nothing wrong with either way. It's just transparency. So I was freaking out, being like, what am I doing wrong? Right. How is it that they're able to go out to dinner or, they're still able to only work one job and not make as much money as they need to? And it's kind of funny now looking back, because I'm like, well, of course they had help. The whole time I'm like beating myself up.
Right. Now that you know more about the world, you're like, oh, duh, those signs were all there. I just like didn't know that's how things could work. Like, yeah, totally fair.
Right. So there was also a lot of my 20s. There was also just like, why can't I figure this out? And but that's another reason why I think schools need to teach basic life skills, like.
We could go on a little tangent. I'll just go on a small tangent. Because what I do think is interesting is that, like, the things that you find, how it helps you make connections, but also what it's like to work tangentially in an industry that you actually want to be, like, the star of is interesting. But I agree with you on the school point, and I have some not very nice thoughts about it. But there's this big article that came out a few weeks ago in the publishing world about this author who had gotten, like, a 6-figure advance, like, twice, and then blown through it, and then her next book got like a $17,000 advance, and she was like, this is how I blew through like $300,000, and like nobody in my MFA program told me how to like manage money and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, so a lot of that is actually on you to educate yourself. But I was like, there's kind of a reason why MFA programs, and this is like no shade on like MFA programs and universities have like amazing creative potential, and you meet like wonderful people, and there's so much there for like your art and your craft, but they're in the business of just, I think, creating more people to like teach at the like college level and like come back into the academic thing. So they're not going to teach you those life skills. You've got to figure that out on your own. And I have more to say on that also about like the mental health of like creative professionals and what skills they also lack there that you need to turn on, but that we'll jump to that. But I do want to talk about, because what you did was you ended up in nonprofit fundraising at a major New York theater. And when I think about the amount of money that you've been involved in raising, it's like $1 bajillion. I've been in those parties. And then you went to MCC Theater, where I also actually worked as a development assistant when I was like 24. So what is it like? It's interesting because I think you got a lot of connections from it too, but I also remember struggling at some points too, being like, I don't know if you felt this way, but like, here I am like raising money for a theater, here I am like at the opening night parties, here I am like making all of this happen for somebody else. And I remember that being a little bit soul crushing to me.
Yeah. It is soul crushing. I mean, a friend of mine, I don't know if she probably read this somewhere because it's just so eloquent. And so I'm not going to say it the right way, but she was like, eventually you get tired of living someone else's dream. And it was very, I mean, I learned so much working in nonprofit and theater. I learned so much about the business in general. And when I'm dealing with venues for my shows and producers, I know things because of my experience there. But I did that for 10 years and it was really hard at times. But I knew I was needing to survive this way.
Yeah.
But what was so great, especially with MCC, is that I approached that job differently. I went in there, and I think this is why I was able to make the transition, is I went in there saying to them, like right up front, my goal is this, and I want to be a performer, and I do these shows, and this is what I want to focus on. Because initially I went in temporary or like part-time, and they wanted me to go full-time because I was so good.
You are.
And, and I remember telling the executive director over lunch, I was like, I have dreams, and I want to focus on those. And he said, I'd love for this to be your last day job. And so and I worked there for almost 5 years and accomplished so much on my performing side that I had in any other job, balancing both of them. But I just changed my mindset and said, my performing comes first. And I mean, I had to show up to work. I had my work done. They were paying my bills.
And you had goals to hit there too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then eventually I went, I was full-time, and then I would take all my vacation, all my paid time off, my sick day, like everything I could, I would put towards anytime I was touring. And then it got to the point where I was just out of the office so much that I had to go part-time. Yeah. And eventually it was like, okay, it's time to go. It was just a gradual progression, and it was the best departure from an organization I've ever experienced.
Okay, that's nice.
I'm going there in a couple days. They're letting me get a flu shot there.
That's beautiful. Bless them. That's how you really support artist organizations. If you're like, how do we make the programs? Like, no, just let people have a flu shot. If you want to make a difference, just give flu shots to your entire artistic, your whole stable of artists.
But it was, and I didn't realize it at the time when I went into working for MCC, because in between MCC and the public, I had another job that I was not happy in, and that was like a really low point. That was like the Sunday, what do they call it when you're dreading Monday? Sunday somethings.
Yes.
I just hated Sunday nights because it was, and I dreaded getting out of bed in the morning, and I was like, I don't ever want to feel like this again. So I just kind of, without even thinking about it, just shifted the way I was approaching the next job.
I think that's really cool. I think probably you could do it because you had enough actual administrative fundraising experience to be I can do these things for you, but I know what I'm doing. You couldn't have done that in the beginning. That wouldn't have worked.
A lot of people ask me, and that was one of the things I told them when I was leaving MCC. I was like, just so you know, I've been doing this. I'm not as young as I appear. I've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
And and I've earned, not earned it. That's not the right word. I've made it clear what I'm able to do, and I kind of have the reputation of oh yeah, she'll deliver on this. So. I worked my way up to it.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's really cool because I think that when you're first trying to figure it out, you don't know what kind of options are available to you for how you can support yourself, how you can marry your creative career with your day job, what kind of form that might take. It's not easy. There's a lot to balance and figure out, but there is more than just there's not just you wait tables and are miserable and then hope that you get the right agent.
And I was really lucky that everyone was so and continues to be so supportive.
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And there are other people administratively. I know the audience services director, I think she's doing a writing program right now. Like everyone, you know, everyone has their creative outlet that they want to nurture.
Yeah.
And so when you have an environment that allows for it, it makes better employees.
Oh no, I think you're totally right, because I think I have seen some places and been in some places where like all of that aspiration was not encouraged, and so you were kind of like hiding, you know, you're hiding the emails that you just sent during the day, or like, you know, on the side, like, I'm not really paying attention. Like you're making phone calls for your creative stuff. And you're like,
I mean, that's why I stayed at MCC for so long, because they were allowing me to balance both.
Yeah.
So it really does make for a better work environment.
I want to bring up something else that the people might not know about you, but you are one of my star pupils and my biggest success. So a few years ago, when I was training in one of the programs I teach called it's called CIJ right now, it rebranded. It's just called CIJ. I needed test pupils while I was training, and so I gathered a bunch of friends, Tori being one of them, and I was like, I'm going to give you this program about creativity and mindfulness, and you just show up to my friend's apartment once a week and take notes, and like, oh, maybe I'll change your life, I don't know, but like, I'm also just practicing, and it was like so fun to like get together with your friends once a week, like in Luke's apartment, you know, and be like, okay,
I love
here it is. And you were one of my most diligent students, and you have gotten the furthest along, Tori, and I think it's because you were diligent, and that's not just a credit to my teaching. But I remember something happened to you right before you took this class, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think somebody said something to you kind of important, and then you were like, oh, okay, and it made you a little open to thinking about things differently. So if you remember what that is, can you talk about it?
Completely.
Okay.
Like that section of my life like turned everything over. And I mean, honestly, I think it was just the right time. And it's like people that go to college later in life and just absorb so much more because they appreciate it more. I, not to name drop, but I
Go ahead.
I'm going to. But I had dinner with Lisa Lampanelli, who was a stand-up comedian, but has since, I think, retired from stand-up comedy and is more of an inspirational life coach of sorts now, which makes sense. I mean, she life coached me over that dinner right into your program.
And then I life coached you a little further, and here you are. Okay.
Totally. She was like, here's what it is, and then pushed me to you, and it was like, great. And she had seen my show a couple times, and she basically said, it was like someone that I really respected, being a straight shooter with me. No, can I curse?
Yep.
No bullshit.
Great.
But she said, you know, I remember so clearly, she just looked me right in the eyes and said, do you know how good you are? And it was, you know, you never really say that. I never wanted to walk around being like, I am so good at what I do, because you're taught to just be, you know, humble and whatnot. And I didn't want to be too out there about it. But like, I had felt that I was like, I'm, you know, as I went along doing these shows and people responding, the first show I ever did, I just did it because I was drunk and said I would. And it evolved. And then eventually you start to be like, oh, actually, I'm kind of good at this. But I'd never had anyone who had such a successful career in a similar field look at me and say that. And it caught me off guard. And she went into this speech about, you know, I don't want to have the same conversation with you in 5 years. She said, I am not as funny as a lot of the female comedians that I know. The difference is I grabbed a hold of what I could do. I set goals for myself, and I was really smart on the business end. And I found a way to make it work for me without, you know, getting out of my own way, basically. And yeah, this was, you know, over dinner. And I just was like, and I don't even think we were drinking because she doesn't really drink. And so I was like, oh no, so I was sober listening to this. And it just kind of rocked. It like shifted something. And she said, you need to set up a 5-year plan for yourself. What do you want? What is it that you want? And it's not that she made it all click for me.
Right.
She just she shifted something where I thought, oh, I'm just sitting waiting for things to happen, and I'm not taking control of things to happen. Like, even though I'm getting on stage and performing, I'm not doing everything I can do to make shit happen. And then I think it was like right around the same time that you had emailed about this class. And I mean, talk about like being open.
Yeah.
And the moment you're open to something, things come your way. And so I was just all in.
Yeah.
I loved it. I still go back to like, I still have the
notebooks or the pamphlets. Yeah. The handouts.
To remind myself of things.
Yeah.
That's
so cool that like somebody that you respected at the right moment and where you were open to, I mean, you had done enough work to get yourself to a point where you could listen to her. Like if you hadn't done any shows, you'd be like, I don't know. But you had gotten to a point that someone that you respected could very seriously tell you need to take yourself seriously. And then you were like, okay, I can hear that and I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think that it, with what she said and then with your class, like it was a point where I finally like was willing to look at things. And because I had done so much growth in figuring out who I was, even though there was still so much to unpack, I was like at a point where I was like, yes, let's do this. Let's unpack everything. I'm confident in myself to do this.
So that's interesting, because I think one of the things we're talking about with like MFAs and stuff, and not to harp on MFAs, sorry guys, but like Alexa's talking to me right now. It's so great. Thank you, Alexa. Don't even know what she said. She's reminding me to do something. Thank you, Alexa.
Oh, thank God.
Okay, thank you, Alexa. Stop. Okay. Anyway. So, not to harp on MFAs, but one of the reasons why I started teaching about creativity and doing things like you're doing great and talking to people about like their creativity and their mindset and things is that I took me a long time to realize some of the reason why things weren't happening for me are because I didn't know how to manage like my own mental health. I didn't know that like I was the person in charge of my mindset, and these were all like skills that I had to learn to be able to like fortify myself for like to be constantly engaging in the creative process, to be able to market yourself, to be able to think of it as like a business and a career and not just like I'm waiting tables and I get a big break kind of thing. So I totally hear you on that, because I think it takes a while to learn. I don't even know if someone had told me when I was 21, if they told me about it, that I would have listened either. So, maybe,
no.
but it's something that you have to learn.
Yeah, because I remember I had a roommate who, she was like really into, I mean, it's everyone's different interpretation, but she would like say, oh, just put it out into the universe and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I would just be like, you're full of shit. Right. Right. It just was, but I was blocking everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in my 20s, I was certainly not ready.
So after you had this conversation with Lisa Lampanelli, like what are some of the things that you did change or the ways in which you stopped blocking yourself? Like, and if you have like concrete examples, I'm sure people would appreciate. Like,
I mean, I started to really map out, she said, do you have a 5-year plan? And I Googled 5-year plan templates.
Yes. Tori, yes. You educated yourself. Googling counts as self-education. Because
I was like, I don't even know like where to begin.
Yeah.
And so I found like these different kinds of templates where like different areas of your life to focus on instead of like one ball of a mush.
Yeah.
And I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's something like your work, your professional life, your health, and your like love, friendship, family,
connections,
or like relationships.
Yeah. Okay.
And professional's going really well.
Great, Tori. Great.
But I was able to sort of like, I was able to break things up and also have benchmarks.
Okay.
where I could say, okay, this is realistic. And listen, I mean, I did this 5-year plan and it was like, yeah, here I am, I'm going. And I've had, motivation. I just read this somewhere. Motivation is not constant. And so you go through like different waves of things where I would not be focusing on the 5-year plan, and then I'd revisit it, and I'd actually be surprised at like certain things I was able to do because I had set it up.
And you had something written down that you could refer back to. It wasn't just like in your head. Yeah.
Everything. Okay. And that was the big thing, is I just started writing everything down and setting the goals and going back to them. And like this was August 2015, right? Because I was in September, I think, was when I started. September, yeah. And since then, beginning of every year, I've sort of regrouped and said, okay, let me look at the year ahead. Let me look at this year ahead to try to, and it evolves, throughout the year. And it just helps, especially when I'm off course, which happens. The beginning of this year was like a rough one. Just a long winter and not as many gigs. Because 2018 was like so jam-packed. Okay. And then the next year started and it didn't happen as like I thought it would. And so
do you find there is also like kind of like a rhythm that you have to get into, and then you also have to be ready to be flexible for when rhythms change. But it's like, I find like with publishing, it was like, okay, I could put out one book, but then I hadn't thought like, oh, you need to like know when the next ones will come out, or how you'll be able to make those, or like, so you can do one like full year and then be like, get to the next year and be like, I didn't plan for this one, I was just getting through without. I mean, it's the same thing like fundraising and like theater administration too. Is like you're doing the 2019 season, but you have to be planning the 2020 season as well.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's tricky. I'm trying to do that, but it's tricky because it's like just now I'm planning, February and March of 2020, and it's like slowly coming together. The end of 2020 is a different story, but honestly, the end of 2019 didn't really show itself until a couple months ago. But I think as long as there's like the base there, it helps because it keeps the motivation going. I mean, listen, I certainly have my days of laying on the couch being like, everything.
Why? Like, these choices. Sometimes I'm like, why am I living out the dreams of an 18-year-old? Who said this was a good idea?
Yeah, but it's, I think those days are important to have. But I now have the tools in place that I didn't have before to come back to reality and say, you know what? It's okay, because here's the thing I'll do next, or here's the thing I'll try to tackle to get where I'm going.
Yeah. That's awesome. So through this like very roundabout route of self-discovery and different jobs and things, you went from like, I remember you played in like a bathhouse, and now you're on like cruises and performing in like the UK and going like international. So it is, again, that's the interesting thing too, is I think it's easy in hindsight to be like, oh, that was the path, but like while you're on it, it's hard to be like, I don't know where the next twist and turn is coming, and I don't know. So on that note, if you could give a pep talk to your past self, like last week, 10 years ago, whatever, what would you say?
I mean, I'm always giving myself pep talks now.
Here. That's why there's a podcast. Yeah.
I wrote a whole show earlier this year about all of the self-help books I'd listened to.
Beautiful. Great.
Because, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. But I wish I had the skills to go back to my 20-year-old self. I don't think she would have listened because she didn't know who she was. But now that I'm approaching the end of a decade, And I mean, we're all approaching the end of a decade, but like I am actually
I am
like
also approaching the end of a decade.
right?
My decades go with the decades, so like as the world
Yep,
winds
too.
down, my decades do too. So like
Yep.
yes, yeah.
And I have a birthday in January, so I
Yeah.
always feel
Oh.
like I know, right?
It's like new
Ugh.
year and new
Rappaport.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always just kind of like, oh, it really is the start of a new year. And this one's tough. This one has been really difficult as I get closer to it. But I wish I could go back to like my 30-year-old self and give the pep talk I give myself now, which is I just stop and breathe and I go through all of the things I've accomplished and how far I've come. Because it also helps when I find that I'm comparing myself to other people, which is the worst thing to do because everyone's on a different path. And I constantly have to remind myself that because it's very easy to fall into that trap. And I just go through and say, look at where you are and compared to where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And all that you've accomplished. So it would be nice to look back at 30-year-old self and be like, you're going to be okay. I mean, you're also not, but you are.
Right. So it's like looking back at your track record, keeping like a celebration list of like what you've accomplished and eyes on your own paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I was really frustrated earlier this year about things not moving in the direction I wanted them to. And a friend of mine actually reminded me, and she was like, yeah, but what do you have planned this summer or in the spring? Or what country are you going to perform? Like it just remembering, okay, it might not be happening as quick as I want it to, but I am moving in the right direction. So it's just that kind of reminder that I think always helps me once I get out of my funk.
Totally. So in your world, are there people that help you keep on track, or like are there friends? You have an agent, a manager. Like who are the people in your when you staff up? Like who are the people that help keep you on track?
Right now, I feel like it's my best friend is she's so great. Her name is Lexi, and she's like I call her a power top. She works in marketing. She works at Google. Well, she's actually a freelancer, and Google's one of her clients. So she's like power top. Yeah. And she's someone who is great to talk to because she constantly reminds me. We lived together. First, it was the 4 girls, and then just the 2 of us for a while. So we lived together for like 8 years. So we know each other really well, and we also know how far we've come from the time we were 22, 23 living here. And so she's a great reminder of, sometimes she'll send me like time hop posts. Yeah. Oh. She sent me a time hop post that she was going to my show at Vlada and 10 years ago or something. And she just sent me the screenshot of it and was like, look at how far you've come. So it's like, and I'm doing the same with her, reminders, because I think that's important. And then I have a manager, but it's right now it's really just like all business, all like he's like a booking manager, so it's like next venue. But he gave me a pep talk the other day about money and just asking for your worth. Yeah. And because I was like, I don't want to lose this job if we're asking for too much. And he said, you have to understand this is a very reasonable amount for what you do. And you have to be confident enough to say, listen, if you're not willing to pay my worth, I'm gonna have to walk away from this.
Okay, that is cool, because it's kind of the same thing that when you switched your mindset to MCC and you were like, I'm gonna do a great job for you, but you have to know that my focus is my performing career, and they had to hire you for those skills, and also know that like you were gonna walk away if it wasn't worth it to you.
Yeah, so that was a big, and that was hard because also I just transitioned over into freelancing, so it's like I don't want to lose a job because I feel like I can't afford to. Right. But he wasn't really saying that. He was saying, obviously there'll be bargaining, but you have to go into this knowing what your worth is.
I think, Tori, what he's trying to tell you is you have to go into these negotiations as a power top.
Yeah. Right. Which also, can I tell you, that's another thing I've had to pull from past working in nonprofit fundraising, is that I had no problem asking people for money when it was for this theater or this organization.
Right. You're like, give us this money. We need it for the art.
And when it's for yourself, it's interesting how you suddenly get a block on that.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm definitely working on because it is my sole financial focus now. It is, I have to be more conscious of, I have to be able to make X amount of money on this, or I just need to know my worth. So that's important to have.
That's so cool. That's so cool, Tori. Well, before I let you promo everything, I just want to make sure I give you a pep talk because I've known you for a long time now. And, we started off together in this, little apartment in Astoria, getting drunk on cocktails and being like, blah, blah, I don't even know what we talked about. So, but I was like, guess what? I have a calendar. I'm a pinup. And you were like, yeah, me too. I'm a performer. And I was like, yeah, this is how we go. Okay. And, for some... we had enough wherewithal. I think this is the beauty of knowing people for a long time, but we had enough chutzpah and and enough bravado to be like, this is what I am, this is what I'm going to do. But whether or not we felt like we could back it up, I've seen you ride a certain amount of faith in yourself, and to take it this far is really exciting. Just I remember the first time you booked a show at Joe's Pub, all of your friends were we were out of our minds.
I know, so
excited. But that was also interesting to me too, because for us it was of course you should be at Joe's Pub. You have all the connections, you have all the talent, of course you should be at Joe's Pub. And I'm sure for you it was more intimidating than that, but to see you show up at Joe's Pub, when we were all gathering friends and wanting to fill it to show them that Tori Scott is worth the investment, and then to see that now you're going on cruises and you're you're a celebrated gay icon, and, and that you've made it happen this far. It's that you can now live the dream and the goal that you set out for yourself way back in the day. You're embodying the thing that you said you would do, and it's just really, really cool as a friend to see that evolve for you, and to know that, to have the behind the scenes info on what it's been to get there. But we're just everyone is really, really proud of you, Tori. Even if we can't see you because you're touring all the time, we're really, really proud of you.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I mean, I remember before I went on stage at Joe's Pub for the first time, I saw Bridget Everett's show a couple weeks before and was just what am I doing? What am I doing? And it just, I mean, when they say just take the leap, it can be just walking out on a stage. I mean, it really changed everything. It changed everything. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tori. I know. Oh God. If we were recording this in person as we meant to, we'd be like, oh God.
No, it means a lot to me because I feel the support and I feel the love. And what's also really great is, I know everyone's schedule is so hard that the last thing you want to do is constantly promote your show to your friends because they can't come to every show. And there's nothing, I feel nothing but absolute thrill when I walk out onto the stage at Joe's Pub and I don't know anyone in the audience.
Oh yeah, when I go to your shows now and I don't know people, I'm like, we're doing it. We made it.
It's a delight when I see you or when I see Maureen or whoever, but it's not I'm please come to my show, which is also a relief because it starts out that way for everyone. And so it's just so lovely to have. I feel the support, and it doesn't have to be seeing you at my shows or seeing all of my friends at my shows. It's that you guys believe in me, and I know you do. And that to feel that from your circle of friends is everything.
Yeah.
So if anyone listening doesn't have that kind of support group,
get new friends. Get new friends.
Friends that make you feel bad.
Get new friends. We don't have time to waste on friends who don't help you out. No. That totally right. I know. I feel like some of my fifth memoir will be like like with a little help from my friends or like yeah.
Like it's so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
It's like they tell you for like mental health for a performer, a lot of people say, find a connection to a spiritual connection to something, something to believe in, whether it's, religion or whatnot. And I think that just goes with find friends that will support you and not make you feel bad or compare you to other people. Like
I think what you're meaning to say, Tori, is you need to find friends that tell you you're doing great.
Exactly. That's the key.
All right, so why don't you tell people where they can find you on the internet, where they can find you live, and maybe just tell us the locations of your next few gigs so we can brag about it.
Sure. You can find all the information on my website, which is itstoryscott.com, and you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at It's Tori Scott. Because I'm going to be, if there are any bears listening, I think there's still room. I'm doing a bear cruise November 2nd through the 9th through the Western Caribbean. Ooh. And then I'll be in the UK, Cardiff, Birmingham, Newcastle, and London. And then I'll be in Fort Lauderdale on November 30th and Joe's Pub in New York, December 2nd.
Oh, exciting. Yeah. I hope to be at your Christmas show. I'm not sure yet, but I hope to be there. Oh. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Tori. And
thank you. This is great.
Yeah. Okay, so.
And you're doing great.
Oh my God, Tori, thank you. Okay, that was so good. That's the perfect way to end that.
Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down.